Okay, so the American Promise is a speech by LBJ, Lyndon B. Johnson. He says, I speak tonight for the dignity of man and the destiny of democracy. So President Johnson begins by talking about the dignity of man. In this case, man means humanity, not just men. The dignity of man, or human dignity, suggests that all people have dignity because they are human. The civil rights movement claimed that African Americans were treated as if they were worthless. They were treated without dignity. All human beings deserve some dignity, but African Americans were not treated with respect. President Johnson also talks about the destiny of democracy. The destiny of democracy means the fate of our government. He says, at times, history and fate meet at a single time and a single place to shape a turning point in man's unending search for freedom. So it was at Lexington and Concord. So it was a century ago at Appomattox. So it was last week in Selma, Alabama. President Johnson refers to some important moments in American history. Lexington and Concord is where the first shots were fired in the Revolutionary War, the war for U.S. independence. Appomattox is where the Civil War ended. That helped America become united again. Johnson describes these as turning points. Johnson brings up two turning points in American history. If no one fought at Lexington and Concord, America would not have become independent. If the Civil War had not ended, the country might not have been reunited. Johnson makes a connection between these events and what happened last week in Selma, Alabama. He says there, long-suffering men and women peacefully protested the denial of their rights as Americans. Many were brutally assaulted. One good man, a man of God, was killed. So in Selma, Alabama, about a week before President Johnson's speech, a group of protesters had a peaceful march to bring attention to discrimination. Johnson describes this as the denial of their rights as Americans. Johnson is saying that African Americans have been denied their rights as Americans. At that time, African Americans did not have many of the rights and opportunities available to white Americans. In this speech, Johnson focuses on the right to vote. This is Johnson's description of what happened in Selma. African American protesters had a peaceful march to bring attention to discrimination. Policemen attacked them. Civil rights protesters in Selma were beaten and physically hurt. One protester was murdered. These were brutal assaults. President Johnson calls Selma a turning point. He compares it to other major events in American history, such as the battles at Lexington and Concord. He is saying that the civil rights movement is an important period in American history. Today, most people would agree with President Johnson. At that time, it was surprising for a U.S. president to say this. And here is a picture of a peaceful protest during the civil rights movement. He says, and should we defeat every enemy, should we doubt our wealth and conquer the stars, and still be unequal to this issue, then we will have failed as a people and as a nation. For with a country, as with a person, what is a man profited if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Johnson argues that if the United States cannot support racial equality, it does not matter what else the country achieves. Johnson names other goals the country had accomplished: defeating enemies, improving the economy, and exploring space. Then Johnson quotes the Bible. The quote is another way to say that if the country can't fix the civil rights problem, it doesn't matter what else the country accomplishes. Johnson suggests that civil rights relates the heart of what makes the United States great. He says this was the first nation in the history of the world to be founded with a purpose. The great phrases of that purpose still sound in every American heart, North and South. All men are created equal. Government by consent of the governed. Give me liberty or give me death. President Johnson connects the fight for civil rights to American history. He says the country was founded with a purpose and cites three phrases that expresses that purpose. All men are created equal. This comes from the U.S. Declaration of Independence, an important document. This phrase means every person is born equal. Government by consent of the governed, a phrase from the U.S. Declaration of Independence that says a good government gets its power from the people and the people agree to listen to the government. Give me liberty or give me death. This line is from a speech by Patrick Henry, who wanted to send troops to fight in the Revolutionary War. President Johnson says that America was founded as a place of equality and liberty, where the government gets power from the people. Without the civil rights movement, these phrases would not be true for African Americans. They were not treated as equals, they were not free. Since they could not vote, they could not give their consent to the government. He says, our fathers believed that if this noble view of the rights of man was to flourish, it must be rooted in democracy. The most basic right of all was the right to choose your own leaders. Wednesday, I will send to Congress a law designed to eliminate illegal barriers to the right to vote. The broad principles of that bill will be in the hands of the Democratic and Republican leaders tomorrow, but I want to really discuss with you now briefly the main proposals of this legislation. So President Johnson uses three related words: law, bill, and legislation. A bill is an idea or proposal for a new law. Legislation is the formal term for laws. A law is a specific rule to guide behavior in a society. In the American government, Congress writes laws. Johnson wants a new law to stop discrimination against African American voters. He has to persuade Congress to pass that law. He can make a proposal, a bill, but only Congress can make the law.